Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I decided to make another video, and this video is gonna be a little weird. That's so dumb. This video is sponsored by Bastion. As a writer who's currently working on my own weird fiction story, I love to use my Bastion carbon fiber ballpoint pen to write down all my little thoughts and make my weird little worlds. Bastion's pens are the highest quality ballpoint and fountain pens you can get on the market right now. And if you click on the link in my description, you can use my code JCJ20 to get 20% off your pens and anything else from their website. It's not just pens. They've got like knives and gun plates and stuff. But I'm here for the pens. So thank you again, Bastion, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for sending me this lovely carbon fiber pen. It's very heavy and I really like it. Give me more. Back to the video. A little bit ago, I made a video for you guys about my favorite subgenre, cottagecore. And you guys really liked that video, and some of the comments, or a lot of the comments, were asking me what were some other subgenres that I really like. And it got me thinking, I think I want to make a series showing you guys, teaching you guys about my favorite lesser known subgenres in case you want to check out the stuff that I am reading. I was inspired specifically to make this video because I finished reading the book The Navigating Fox by Christopher Rowe yesterday, and this is in that subgenre, and it got me in the mood to read more and to talk about it. So here we go. Let's talk about weird fiction. When I say weird fiction, you might just think I'm saying, wow, this fiction's kind of weird. And I mean, you're not wrong, but let me tell you why you're wrong. The term weird fiction was coined in the 20th century, but it actually originates all the way back with Edgar Allan Poe. Now I know you guys have heard of Edgar Allan Poe before. He's the Raven guy. And while you think, no, he writes gothic stuff, actually, yeah, I mean, his stuff is gothic leaning, but he has been identified since as one of the pioneers of weird fiction. The purpose of weird fiction, weird fantasy, or any other versions of that term is to dramatically eschew and change what we think of specific tropes. It does often align with horror, speculative fiction, and the macabre, but it has since made its way into science fiction, fantasy, and pretty much every genre you can think of. At its core, the point of weird fiction is to play on the reader's ever-building sense of dread that something is not right and it's bigger than us. There are forces outside of our understanding and the character's understanding. And to give you a better example of what exactly I'm talking about, I will point out to you the most famous author of weird fiction. Haha, it's H.P. Lovecraft. Do you have a better idea now? Then you know who this guy is on the cover and why he's terrifying. H.P. Lovecraft started publishing his works around 1937, and it was actually him who identified Edgar Allan Poe as sort of the father of weird fiction. So you can still think Edgar Allan Poe is only gothic, but if you trust the word of a weird dude like Lovecraft, he didn't have the best thoughts, so maybe we don't trust him. But for the point of this video and for education on history, it's Edgar Allan Poe. He was the first one to do it that we remember. H.P. Lovecraft has hundreds of tales that you can go through, and his most iconic character or being or creature or disturbing presence in your mind is Cthulhu. In fact, Lovecraft's stories of Cthulhu and his other tales are so popular that we now use the word Lovecraftian and Lovecraftian horror to describe things that are actually weird fiction. According specifically to Lovecraft, the weird is the malign suspension of the laws of nature and things that are supposed to safeguard our fragile psyches against chaos and malignancy just lurking out there in the cosmos. Weird fiction plays on the audience's discomfort, but that doesn't mean that all weird fiction is meant to be disturbing and should fall under the horror category. Nay, nay. In fact, a lot of weird fiction is completely innocent and only hinges a little bit on the weird. Something that I think is important to note is that we as children were actually exposed to a lot of cosmic horror and the idea that something else is out there because it is a big staple in children's cartoons. Specifically, I'm talking about shows like Gravity Falls, Over the Garden Wall, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and even standalone episodes of things like SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents deal with this. I'm sure there's other shows I'm missing, but Cosmic horror and eldritch nonsense and fear of the unknown is drilled into us from a very young age, and I clung to it. When it comes to Lovecraft specifically, yes, it's horror, but the weirdness is not his alone. There are tons of authors that did and still publish weird fiction. In the 1920s, pulp magazines became very popular, and specifically in America, the magazine Weird Tales, which published weird tales between the 1920s and 1950s. That being said, one of the staples of weird fiction, which honestly is ironic because the point of weird fiction is that it shouldn't have any staples, but it is the creatures. China Miéville, who is in fact the founding member of the New Weird movement that I'll get to in a second, talks a lot about the phenomenon of the tentacle. He is of course referring to Cthulhu and Lovecraft's work, but the point of the tentacle is that the creatures found in weird fiction are not the traditional ones we find in European folklore and European-based horror stories. So yes, weird fiction might include things like vampires, werewolves, fairies, that sort of thing. But the point of New Weird and weird fiction is to completely subvert what the reader knows about those creatures and make something new. So it was in the year 2000 that China Miéville released the Perdido Street Station, which really did mark the beginning of the New Weird and brought weird fiction back into mainstream reading. Now I need to read some quotes on my laptop because the words are too big for my small brain to understand and memorize. So this is what China Miéville has to say. New Weird exercises in world building characterized by a heterogeneity of sources, genres, and details. Particularly eclectic, mixing modern street culture and ancient mythology. One of the terms I came across a lot while researching for the weird fiction and New Weird video was genre fluid, which I love. And that's exactly the point, honestly. Weird fiction isn't even a genre, is it? There are critics that still say weird fiction isn't even a genre. It's just things that people think are weird. And because of that, it's really hard to nail down what exactly is weird fiction versus what's just horror or fantasy or science fiction that's a little odd. Ultimately, in my opinion, it's up to the author and the reader to decide. I went around finding books for this video that I feel belong in the weird fiction or New Weird genres. The author might disagree, I wouldn't personally know, but I think they belong in this genre, so I'm including them in the video. That's kind of how this genre works. I have another quote here, which is from one of my favorite New Weird authors, Jeff Vandermeer. This is from the anthology, The New Weird, that he and his wife Anne Vandermeer put together. They describe New Weird as a type of urban secondary world fiction that subverts the romanticized ideas about place found in traditional fantasy, largely by choosing realistic, complex real-world models as the jumping off point for creation of settings that may combine elements of both science fiction and fantasy. So that's a little wordy, but ultimately my interpretation of the point is that weird fantasy and New Weird is meant to subvert genres as we know them. I read some articles on how to write weird fiction, and one of the ones I found basically sums it up to weird fiction is a vibe. And this is actually directly from H.P. Lovecraft himself again. He states in his short essay, Notes on Writing Weird Fiction, that those attempting to write weird fiction do need to start with the mood, and one should be brainstorming concrete images, locations, weather, and words that perfectly encapsulate the vibes that you're trying to create. The same article also emphasizes that you should throw any tropes out the window. No tropes. And what that means essentially is that if you are using a trope or a cliche, make sure it brings something new to what you're writing or play off of it in a way that will make your reader think and is not making your work predictable or obvious. On the same note, it's important to find a deeper, darker meaning in your writing. And yeah, as much as I'm just sort of like spewing facts at you right now and things I've read, that is also something that for me is very important in the weird fiction that I read. I think that's what draws me to weird fiction, is that sense that although there is a story that you're reading, there's something bigger going on all the time. I absolutely love that when you're reading a story that feels small, like you're following one or two characters on their specific quest and you have no idea to what extent they are impacting the larger world. I've made a video before about how one of my favorite fantasy tropes is meddling gods, and I love it when a writer creates their own pantheon for that purpose. I don't think that like a meddling god in the form of Loki from Norse mythology would like be weird fiction or be that intriguing to me, but I want to know some eldritch made-up god that you have that is meddling with the characters. I mean, Loki is a made-up god as well, but you know what I mean. I've put together a selection of books that I own and have read and love that I consider to be weird fiction, whether that's because everyone thinks they're weird fiction or because I read it and personally think it's weird fiction. I've divided them into 5 subcategories of the subgenre, just to give you a better idea of what kind of range weird fiction can have and to really solidify what weird fiction is, because I know that you might be confused because weird fiction in and of itself is weird and doesn't make sense. So let's take a look at some books. First, this is already obvious, but I've just got my Lovecraft books here. I also own the Necronomicon, which is right here. I don't feel like pulling it out, but that's Lovecraft as well. These are both just story collections of his work. So this one is entirely about Cthulhu, and this one is, I mean, there's a little bit of Cthulhu, but it's some of his other tales as well. And look, we've got tentacle fishy boys right on the cover. After that, I have some new weird horror to show you. I read Sister Maiden Monster by Lucy A. Snyder last year, and it was one of my top books of the year. I knew right off the bat that this would be a book that I loved. This is set after the COVID-19 pandemic with a new pandemic that is slowly turning people into eldritch monsters. Now, this one is pretty obviously Lovecraftian. We've got the tentacles right on the front, plus a lot of the words describing this book in the pitches are like cosmic horror, Lovecraftian, and eldritch, and those are 3 buzzwords that will always draw me in. I'm doing a video later on about like, do buzzwords actually work or do they mean nothing? My opinion is they mean nothing, but I will still go for those 3. Now, if you want to read Sister Maiden Monster, I will say that this book is R-rated. Check trigger warnings before diving in. It's disgusting. It's very violent, very sexual, but overall I adored it, and the cosmic nonsense that happens at the end is less on the tentacly side and more an example of weird fiction that is different from Lovecraft is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now this certainly falls into horror. It's a haunted house story, but it's different. It really, really subverts the haunted house genre in ways that feel more cosmic. Plus the physical book itself is weird, because I will try not to like show too much for spoilers' sake, but it's written in a very unsettling way. It's a story within a story within a story that does involve you, the reader. So I guess trigger warning, if you are worried about being haunted in real life, you might if you read this book. Next, we'll talk about fantasy, because I want to talk to you guys about The Navigating Fox. Now, this is not horror in the slightest. That being said, this book deals 100% with the unknown. It's not set necessarily on our world. Honestly, it might be. It's hard to tell. But this is a world where humans exist alongside knowledgeable creatures. So about half the animal population has the intelligence of a human, and they can speak, and they are part of society as normal, where the other half of the animal population are animals as we know them. They're described as voiceless in this book. Yeah, they exist as beasts of burden or in the wild. But this is the story of Quintus, this fox, who is tasked with leading a group of explorers along the Silver Roads, so these roads that go through an alternate dimension to the gates of hell. I highly recommend this as dipping your toes into weird fiction if you're not sure you're interested in the horror side of it or anything too extreme or long. Navigating Fox. And there's talking raccoons. Need I say more? A book that I read 2 years ago, I believe, that would fall into the general fiction category of weird fiction, if I had to say. If anything, it's kind of an urban fantasy, but it is shelved as fiction in bookstores, and that's The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. While reading this book, I actually was reminded a lot of Gravity Falls, the TV show, where it starts out where you're aware strange things are going on, and the characters are aware as well. They come from a setting that is not our world necessarily, so they're in on the strange things that are happening, but the general population in the town this is set in is not aware either. But by the ending, we have full-scale Bill Cipher level nonsense happening, different dimensions opening up, pyramids in the sky. This was a phenomenal book. And while it's not horror, there's definitely some graphic violence and sexuality in this one. So again, if you are not interested in that, just go back to the Navigating Fox. But this is like one step down from the horror ones I showed. Maybe 3 steps down from Sister Maiden Monster, because honestly nothing is at that level that I've ever read. Now I don't own any China Mayville books for whatever reason, I probably should, but another staple of New Weird, who I've already mentioned, is Jeff Vandermeer, who happens to be one of my favorite authors of all time. If you're not immediately familiar with Jeff Vandermeer, you might know his work Annihilation. It was turned into a movie with Natalie Portman in it, and is one of the only cases where I feel that the movie and the book completely on par. One is not better than the other. They're extremely different for various reasons, but they're both incredible. The Southern Reach trilogy, the first book being Annihilation, is his most popular work for sure, and it's weird and it falls into science fiction, but I think it's the least weird of his weird stuff, which is probably why it's the most mainstream and most popular. I've also got 3 books here that he's written: Dead Astronauts, Born, and Hummingbird Salamander. This one is actually very similar to the Navigating Fox, as it's also about a fox who can travel through time and space. But Born is a post-apocalyptic story, and Hummingbird Salamander is sort of like an urban sci-fi thriller, but they're all new weird. When it comes down to it, I just really like books that bring something new to the table, and that new thing for me is when a book is weird. Weird fiction is the perfect name for this genre because there is no other way to describe it. If you've ever read a book, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, or general fiction, and you're like, that was different, that was weird, it's probably weird fiction. I hope I've given you some kind of idea of what this genre is all about, because like I said, there are not really specific definitions of the genre or parameters to it or staples of it, because that's the point. The point is to be different and to be weird. I think if I was a genre, I would be new weird. What do you think? I could go on an entire other rant about books that are trying too hard to be weird and that lean too much into the tentacle and like literal Cthulhu knockoffs, but I won't right now. It's like they're trying to be new weird by writing books about not Cthulhu but pretty much Cthulhu, and by doing that they're trying to make the tentacle mainstream like vampires and werewolves, and therefore it's no longer new weird. It's no longer the tentacle, right? That's not the point, okay? If you have any really weird book recommendations for me, I implore you to leave them in the comments below because I would love to read them. I need more. I'm running out of weird books. Thank you again to Bastion for sponsoring this video. Before I go, you guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 2 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye. Am I weird?